Alright, let's look at the game 25.1. So Prep Test 25 Game 1. Prep Test 25 was administered in June 1998. So you might also hear it referred to as June 1998 Game 1. Alright, this is a grouping game where they give us 7 variables, F, G, H, J, K, L, and M. And they want us to use these variables to fill up two committees, the Planting Committee and the Trails Committee. Now, the first thing you want to notice about this game is that there are a couple things that they tell us in a lot of grouping games, but that they don't tell us in this game. And when you're doing logic games, the information that they don't tell you is oftentimes much more important than a lot of the stuff they do tell you. And when I say more important, obviously you have to pay attention to the stuff they tell you, but what I mean is that a lot of students miss the stuff that they don't tell you, and they just assume that it's going to be like all the other games, and then they get into trouble. So you really need to pay attention to what you don't know here. And the things you don't know in this game are really, I think they're two really important things. One is that you don't know how many are going to be on each committee, right? So some people would call that an undefined game, where because you don't know how many are going to go in each group. So if you say that when I know how many are going to be in the groups, then I'm going to call that defined. Then this game would be undefined. Okay. Other people would call this an undetermined assignment game because we don't know, so it's undetermined how many are going to be in each group. The point, whatever you call it, the point is that you know that is one of the things you're going to have to watch out for in this game. You can't assume how many are going to be in each group, and whenever you can try to figure that out for a particular question, then that's going to be important in that question. So it's always something kind of in the back of your mind, and on occasion it's going to come right to the front of your mind when you're trying to solve a problem. All right. The other thing you don't know is how often each variable is going to go. Okay. They don't say that each of these guys is going to volunteer on exactly one of the committees. And in fact, when we look closer at the game, what we see is that it's very possible for us to leave one of these volunteers out entirely, to decline their volunteer services, right? And on the other hand, it's very possible for us to put one of the volunteers on both committees, okay? Of course, we could put one of the volunteers on just one of the committees. So this game is very different from a lot of the other grouping games that you'll see because of these two things that we don't know. We don't know how many are going to go in each group, and we don't know whether each variable is going to be used, and we don't know how often. If they are used, we don't know how often they're going to be used. Okay, and like I said, there's a lot of vocabulary for this, and depending on what your preparation is before you got to this video, you'll probably have a name for it. There's nothing wrong with having a name for it. In fact, it can be useful. But regardless of what you call it, you need to know that you don't know those two things. Okay, now let's go to the rules. The first rule says that each committee must have at least 3 members. So I just got done saying that it was really important that they didn't tell us how many were going to be on each committee. They still haven't told us that, but they've given us a floor. Each of the committees has to have at least 3. So that's why in the setup you can see in red, I drew at least 3 lines because I know there's going to be at least that many on each committee. I also wrote the rule over here. Okay, I just kind of wrote it out. So the next rule is this one. It says F cannot be on the same committee as K. All right, this is a rule that we're used to dealing with in grouping games, and we're saying F and K can't be in the same group. It says F cannot be on the same committee as K, so you would write that as if F, then not K. If F is in a committee, then K is not in that committee. And the contrapositive of that, which I didn't write out, but which you can certainly write out, is that if K is on a committee, then F is not on that committee, right? So F and K can never be on the same committee. The next rule says if K is on a committee, then J must also be on that committee. So this is just a straightforward conditioning rule. It's written with the if-then, so it's if K is on a committee, then we have to include J. Right? Wherever we put the K, we have to put the J. And if J is left out, then the K will not be on that committee either. Do not take this to mean that if J is on a committee, then K is on a committee. It does not mean that, and hopefully you're well aware of that fact. We look to the fourth rule. It says M must be on at least one of the committees. So one of the things that I was telling you is really important that we don't know is whether each variable is going to be used, and this rule is stemming from that lack of knowledge on our part. So it's telling us that M in particular is going to be used once, but that should just remind us that the rest of the variables don't necessarily have to be used at all. All right, and it's not saying that M is going to be used exactly once, so M still could be used twice for all we know. Excuse me. So the last rule is that the two committees have to have at least one member in common. All right, so there has to be at least one volunteer that is actually on both of the committees. All right, and again, that relates to the things that it's stemming from some of the stuff that we don't know, which is, is each one going to go once? Is each one going to go twice? Now we know that there's going to have to be at least one guy that's going to go twice. All right. Now, in terms of deductions that you might be able to make before you go to the questions, I think there aren't really that many to make in this game. And the reason is because of all the things we don't know. So because we don't know everybody's going to be used, because we don't know how many are going to be on each committee, it's very hard for us to make any deductions. In fact, I don't even think we can make a single deduction. Okay, so I think we would just go right to the questions, and that would make a lot of people uneasy. And I don't blame you if you wanted to do more before the questions. And a lot of times in my videos, I'm telling people to give themselves time to do more before they go to the questions, and that really is very helpful for a lot of games. But in this one, you don't have anything to do, and so you do have to use your judgment to figure out when you're best off just going to questions. All right. So, and you'll get better at that if you're struggling with it and it's earlier in your prep. You get better with that the more games you do. So let's look at the first question. Number 1. Which one of the following is an acceptable selection of volunteers for the committee? So this is a list question, like most first questions on games are, and we know how to do these questions. We just take a rule, we go through all the answer choices, we get rid of the ones that violate that rule, then we go to the next rule, and so on and so forth. Of course, you could also, just to be clear, you could also do this by taking an answer choice and one answer choice and going through all the rules, and then go to the next answer choice and go through all the rules. It's not a big deal, whatever you feel more comfortable with. Me personally, I find it a little bit faster to take a rule, go through all the answer choices, and then go to the next rule. Alright, so each committee must have at least 3 members, so I'll scan really quickly, and I notice that D, the Trails Committee, only has 2 members, so D's out. F cannot be on the same committee as K, so again, we're just scanning really quickly for somewhere where they put F with K, and we notice that that happens in E on the Planting Committee, so E's out. So we're left with A, B, and C. So the next rule says if K is on a committee, then J must also be on that committee. So if we have K somewhere, we have to have J. A checks out. B does not have K anywhere, so the rule's irrelevant, so that checks out. And then in C, we have K on the Trails Committee, but we don't have J, so we get rid of C and we're down to A and B. M has to be on at least one of the committees is the next rule. So in A, we don't have M on a committee, so B is going to be our answer. All right, and there's one extra rule, and just if you want to be 100% careful that you didn't make a mistake, you can look at the last rule and make sure, you can look at B rather, and make sure that it abides by the last rule. That 2 committees have at least 1 member in common. They have H in common, so B does check out. So the answer for the first question is B. Okay, so now let's look at number 2. Number 2, the question stem is a little bit wordy and takes a second to make sense of. It says, if the Planting Committee consists of F, H, L, and M, and if the Trail Committee consists of G, H, and J, then K could replace which one of the following committee members without violating any of the conditions governing the composition of the committees. So they give us an initial setup, and then they want to know which one of the members involved in that initial setup could be replaced wherever it occurs by K without violating any of the rules. Alright, so let's draw up the initial setup. They tell us F, H, L, and M are going to be in the Planting Committee. Okay, so F, H, L, and M. And then the Trails Committee is going to be G, H, and J. Okay, and now we want to know which one of these guys could be replaced by K without any problems. Alright, so let's look at what answer choices they give us. Naturally, the answer choices that they're going to give us are going to be the variables that the volunteers that they've put into the setup already, because we have to replace one of those guys with K. So let's think about this for a second. What rules do we have about K? Because that is what is going to guide our analysis here. Obviously, we want to replace one of these variables with K without violating any of the rules, so we need to know which rules apply to K. But we have this one rule that says if F then not K. So how would that apply to the question we're trying to answer? Well, we notice that F is in the Planting Committee. Okay, so if we tried to replace one of the other members of the Planting Committee besides F, for example, that would be H, L, or M, right? If we tried to replace one of them with the K, we would violate this rule because the F would still be there, and now we're trying to put the K there, and that would violate rule number 2. Okay, so right away we can get rid of H, L, and M because K and F cannot go together. So C, D, and E are automatically out. All right. So we have A and B. Now if we look at other rules we have about K, we have this rule that says if K is involved, then J has to be involved in the committee, right? So wherever we put a K down, we have to put a J down. So if we look at answer choice A, if we tried to replace F with K, then the group of the planting committee would be K, H, L, and M. There would be no J there, all right? And so that one would not work either because it would violate rule number 3. So hopefully B is going to be the answer, and hopefully we're able to replace the variable G in the Trails Committee with K without any issues. Okay, so if we did replace it, and we'll go ahead and do it in a second so you can see it visually, but if we did put the K in place of the G, all right, let's actually just do it now. We should be able to see that we don't run into any problems. And you can check all the rules. M is used. They do have one in common, which is the H. Wherever there's a K, there's a J. There is indeed a J in the Trails Committee, and each of the committees have 3 members. And if there's an F, which is in the Planting Committee, there is no K. So B is the answer here. This is an unusual question. I haven't seen it used very much at all, but you should be able to do this kind of analysis. And again, the reason you should be able to do it is because you know what the rules are, you know what they mean. If you understand the question, then whether you get there really quickly or whether it takes you a little bit longer, you should be able to say, all right, let me do what they tell me. Let me take the variable, replace it with K, see if it violates any of the rules. If it doesn't, then it's your answer, and if it does, then you rule it out. So it's a kind of a mechanical process, and the only reason I'm emphasizing that here is because a lot of people on this question, they would be like, this is the kind of question that I don't know how to get, or I wouldn't know where to start. But and the truth of the matter is that it's a mechanical process. You just need to read the question, you need to understand what they're saying, you need to follow the directions they're giving you, and then check each answer against the rules and figure out which one doesn't create a problem, and that's your answer. Okay, I'm going to do 3, 4, and 5 in the next video just to abide by YouTube's time limit, so I will see you in that video.